Welcome to a complete new webinar series called Create, Share and Inspire. In this short webinar series, I'm going to talk about my pet projects for the last 2 years called Ultra Journeys. But the presentation given here is applicable actually to any project or any product where you want to create beautiful content, you want to organize this content online, and then basically you want to use that content to share, engage, and inspire an audience, and finally then measure the engagement and try to improve. So welcome to my project Ultra Journeys. Ultra Journeys are basically long 1,000+ kilometer endurance journeys to nature, which started mainly 2 years ago, I would say, in 2018, when I did my first big solo run in Vietnam over 2,000 kilometer and 50 days. Continued then the same year on my initial venture into the Himalayas, the high passes, 40 passes in a single traverse of 75 days. Followed the next year by almost triple the number of passes, 120 over 4 months, and more recently climbing 200 forts in the Sahyadris. These big journeys were already a little precursed with a couple of smaller 2-week journeys while I was still working in the time frame 2013-17. So to engage the audience, I created a couple of channels. One important channel is my blog called ultrajourneys.org. Org meaning it's non-profit, non-commercial, which over 2 years has grown in an enormous treasure of more than 500 posts with some 4,000 visitors every month. Instagram is my main medium now to engage my audience. I started a little bit later with Instagram as I was a bit of stuck on Facebook. Now already some 1,100 posts over the last couple of years and 30,000 followers. Finally, also YouTube is there, where I only recently started in the last 2 months, but given the fact that I've captured a lot of content, I already have some 800 videos up, 8 beautiful web series or webinars, and get around 10,000 views per month, over 2,000 subscribers and counting. And then of course the Facebook account, which has been there for more than 10 years, carrying some 35,000 followers, but not as efficient anymore due to messing around with the timeline by Facebook. Okay, in this first part of this 4-part webinar series, we're going to talk about the main thing, which is content creation. How do you create beautiful content regarding a specific product or a project? So I'm going to talk about a number of different types of contents, all of which will build a beautiful database that can then be used to engage people. One is going to be mapping, second thing will planning related, documentation, then of course photography. Photography is very visual and is the best thing to entice people. Videography, of course, nothing better than to capture the dynamics of a scene by motion pictures. Then of course detailed blogging, which is the traditional writing interspersed with pictures and maps. Articles are important. Articles are more like summary blogs over an entire traverse or a journey. Finally, we'll talk about presentations, where we basically are going to structure the things we have learned, the planning, the process, the execution, and then based on this presentation we can start recording a certain storyline, which then can be shared either through on-site or online talks. Finally, we'll talk a little about interactive training boot camps, and finally also short films. So you can see there are a lot of content, types of content you can create for any type of product basically. As usual, you can find this short webinar on HD quality on my YouTube channel listed there, as well as my blog ultrajourneys.org, and a 10-minute preview as usual gets posted on Insta TV and Facebook. Okay, so in my case we talk about ultra journeys, more specifically explorations of very remote places where very few people have been. So that basically puts me in an advantage position as I go to places and can capture beautiful natural scenes that have not seen by many before, of course. So that's Of course, a vantage point, I stay away from touristic and commercial places which are already crowded, and being away from touristic places, I also get to discover innocent hospitality, humanity. I've been doing this initially in the South Indian jungles for almost 10 years as part of the Chennai Trekking Club, and more recently, the last 2 years, in the high passes of the Himalayas. So with this background, let's get started. So very important when we talk about journeys, obviously, is the mapping. How are you gonna plan the routes? This is again about exploration. These are unknown routes. They don't exist on maps. So there's a lot of effort and time that goes in typically planning every ultra journey, which encompasses several months, several thousands of kilometers of route through remote no man's lands. So here I'm making use of basically Google Maps. I have like hundreds of these Google Maps, even from the exploration times of the South Indian jungles as part of Chennai Trekking Club. For every weekend, for every trek in the wilderness, we create a route map where we study the terrain, we study the topography, the vegetation, and then basically put waypoints and trails which can then be used to find our way in the wild. So these maps are of high value, and you'll also see on my blog there are several of these maps giving you I think more than 10,000 kilometers of beautiful routes as of now. Every route, every ultra journey compasses several thousands of kilometers, so every route is typically broken up in what I call traverses. In case of the Himalayas, that would be a pass where you cross a high altitude pass from one valley to another valley across a high range of mountains. So for every pass, basically here you have a certain set of data, like starting point, starting altitude, total climb, total descent, difficulty level, and a lot of other information that you want to basically store in tabular data, given the fact last summer I did some 120 of these passes. So only in sheets or tables you're gonna get a clear overview of these traverse details. So these are again a lot of interesting details, because these are basically part of planning your journey and can also be shared with the audience. Okay, coming to the next point, of course, is photography. So photography is a simple word. It's the art of capturing light. But I've seen over several years of being an enthusiastic photographer that taking good photos really is an art. Even though the cameras or the mobile phone cameras these days are so amazing in terms of quality and automatic settings, that you still need to have some basic skills to get the proper capture basically. One is of course light, right? Photography means capturing of recording of light, so you need to make sure that your light conditions are good, that your subject is properly lit. You don't want to get into shadows or go against the light source. Framing is important. As you can see here, in the frame is essential. You want to make sure your subject is properly framed with enough surrounding area actually, so that it comes out properly whatever you want to capture. I usually shoot a lot of photos every day in the mountains, even though the terrain is very difficult. I stop frequently and shoot more than 500 photos. A lot of these are duplicates to just make sure I capture that right moment when it's like a moving scene. So out of 500, and then shortlist 100 to keep it at the end of the day, as storage limitations are there. Eventually out of those 100, only 10 get posted. So 10 out of 500 means that you hardly post 5% of the photos you take basically. Processing, then a little bit of HDR, a little bit of light tuning, cropping can be needed. One beautiful thing these days is with lenses. Some good mobile phones like the OnePlus 7 and above come with multiple lenses. So you got a zoom lens, you got a normal lens, and you got even macro, which gives you a lot of possibilities to capture both over magnificent scenes as well as very minute details. One other thing is aspect, which I skipped here. Aspects, I've come to believe that you need to capture the scene as per your consumers, as per your viewers. If 70% of your viewers are consuming content on a mobile phone, then it is important that you start focusing take an aspect which is portrait in this case, as that will come out very well on a mobile phone which has the same portrait aspect. There's no point in shooting all landscapes which are then shown in a very small box in the middle of a big empty mobile screen. And then of course megapixels, you might ask yourself, why do you need like 48 megapixels on a OnePlus 7? The reason is very simple. It's not about that you need so many pixels, because that will result in huge image files, but having those number of pixels will improve clarity, and you can also do cropping and digital zoom without affecting the resulting crop. Then of course when you come to dynamics, when there are certain action scenes during the day, like a wild stream crossing, or you're having a difficult traverse across a glacier or a landslide, anything that is moving oriented can be captured in a much richer way with video, obviously, which you will never be able to see in a still frame. You also get the sound, the audio, which can either be the sound of the action or the storyline that you speak in during the video, which adds a lot of details basically. The key with video is basically to take very short clips. You never want to go more than say 30 seconds or 1 minute, because it will get boring. The audience cannot look more than 30 seconds at a given scene unless there is really something is changing, or the action is going on differently, or you keep panning. You have to be very slow in your panning. You cannot shake the phone widely. The audience is looking at the frame, and you have to ensure a very smooth panning as well as zooming if you do any. So videos are interesting because they can also be very diverse. You just don't focus on action. You can also capture the highlights during the day, like the people you meet, beautiful natural scenes, panoramas, challenges along the way. So in addition to taking like 500 shots, still shots during the day, I usually capture around 10 videos, which will really take those highlights that occurred during that day. This is completely complementary with photos. Even though you take photos of a certain scene, if it's needed, you really need to take videos also of the same scene, as it is really useful for content creation later on. Talking about the scene, explaining the scene, showing where it is, what's happening is useful. That's called transcribing. That will make that the video clip, the short clip you make, is self-contained. It doesn't need to be transcribed later. You also, of course, stabilization is important. When you run with a camera, it should be a stable frame. It cannot be shaky, or it will mess up the video. And then you have possibilities these days with slow-mo to really capture a slow down time, which allows you to capture certain fast-moving scenes very beautifully, as well as time lapses, which show you very slow transitions in a beautiful thing, like cloud covers changing over a mountain. Same thing again, light and frame. Proper lighting is important. The framing again, same thing. I shoot all my videos in aspect or portrait aspect, as my users are 70% of the time gonna look on mobiles and not on laptop screens. And then of course editing is there. Editing can be done to crop again the video throughout, which is not important because video consumes a lot of storage space, so you really want to keep the videos short, especially when shooting in HD and high frame rates. Next is education. So you can also place your camera somewhere and keep yourself in the frame to explain a certain important process, or talk about, in this case, minimalistic alpine style gears. Somewhere along the way in your journey, talk about cooking, anything basically that is useful, anything essential that is useful to learn, to capture basically and teach other people. So I got a couple of these videos taken during the trip. You're not gonna take many of these because the number of topics here will be much less limited than the individual scenes you can shoot on video, obviously. Next is to map the journey. As you actually go through a certain traverse, through a certain pass crossing, or you climb a fort, It's very important to notice all the important, what I call waypoints or landmarks along the way during a single day. I'm not talking about the whole journey here, I'm just talking about a single day traverse where you mark, for example, any hamlets, any shelters, any campsites, any river crossings, any splits in the trail, anything important which will be helpful for other people. The beauty here is using OpenStreetMaps and the application OSM I'm able to mark these things offline on my phone directly at the right at my current location, give a descriptive name, give a type. What is it? Is it a pass? Is it a bridge? Is it a hamlet? Is it a house? And then basically 1 week later, when I reach mobile network in a city, I can upload all these points into the public domain OpenStreetMaps database, where the entire worldwide hiking community then has access to these points. Same with the trail, of course, trails can be recorded and uploaded. So this mapping of the journey is an essential documentation in order to engage your followers, the people who might walk into your footsteps, obviously. Next, of course, coming to plain blogging. Everybody is very familiar with blogging. I personally use WordPress, as we'll see in the second chapter of this webinar series. The beauty with WordPress mobile app is that you can blog completely offline, including pictures, maps, and text, completely in the mountains without mobile network, obviously, because there is no network, one. Secondly, because you want to save battery by putting your phone in flight mode. And then when again you reach a city 1 or 2 weeks later, you simply post every thing on your blog directly with a push of a button. Blogging is pretty simple. You don't need to be a literature master. You just take the highlights of the day in terms of the pictures, key pictures of key happenings during the day, encounters, people, challenges along the way, difficult sections of the route. You put a picture for every of these important highlights. You can also put the map of that daily traverse. That's a very important thing, to have a geospatial understanding for the viewer, where exactly am I now in the entire mountain range. And then you basically, for every picture, you're gonna add a small paragraph. Simple as that. And this will create beautiful content for your entire journey on a daily basis of every single traverse. In addition to the daily blogs, of course, it's also important to write what I call articles, basically summaries of the entire journey, or at least of a major traverse, say like 30 passes in Uttarakhand or 50 passes in Ladakh. These articles will be of interest to certain outdoor journals, outdoor groups, or news magazines or so, who are interested to cover your journey. They basically are interested in the high level picture, where you're gonna mention the overall route as well as the highlights and the key learnings during that specific ultra journey. Capturing the learnings is the next thing then. So after you spent all that time planning, after you executed your journey, you come back home at the end of the trip with a lot of learning. It's important to structure all this content, so you again can do that in a very high level way. You take visuals that clearly illustrate the topic that you want to explain, say food and shelter, say gears, say clothing, say weather, say pass crossing. You take a representative picture, you bulletize the key points that you want to mention, and that's it. You just keep the slide as a static object there. This is what I call presentation. I use Google Slides for that. Nice freeware online. Available editing as possible on mobile itself. Okay, after you have this presentation, then it gets really interesting. You can basically then present the presentations by talking about each slide, doing all the audio, adding the storyline or the audio to it, and at the same time record this. So you can record this either like I'm doing now on a mobile, or you can do it on a laptop, where you record using Zoom or Google Meets. You can even record it as you present it live to a live audience online, or you can present it through a live recording in case of an on-site talk somewhere. So by adding a storyline, by adding the explanation to the presentation, you create a self-contained unit, what I call a webinar, that can then be consumed individually by anyone, anywhere, at any time. So it's like a video on demand almost. People don't have to be there at that time, at that place. They can see this thing anywhere. So this creates valuable content which can be added to the website and consumed at any time by the future generation. Next is demos then. Just like you record static presentations, you can also record processes like creating maps, navigating on a mobile phone. This can be both on the laptop again, certain map related processes, anything related to map reading, navigation that you want to explain through certain tools, georeferencing maps, downloading maps, or anything that you want to demonstrate on a phone can also be recorded. So this is basically like an interactive process that you record as a kind of demo for people again to teach them how to do these processes, mostly related again to planning of journeys. After you have these demos, then you can really create beautiful what I called hands-on training programs like my navigation bootcamp, where you basically have like say 10 modules, 10 demos where people can understand what it is about. You can show the theory, you can show the process, and then basically you're gonna give them assignments to make it interactive. The human mind will understand a topic much better by actually practicing it, doing a small assignment, either a field assignment with the phone in the field, navigation, or an online assignment on the laptop, which people have to do, execute, capture the results, submit the results, say in a Google form here, and then as you can see here at the bottom, I get then a Google sheet where I can see say 150 teams sharing, submitting 150 results in an easy format that I can easily correct and give feedback to the participating members. Then of course talks, as I told earlier, talks are mostly built on the same presentations which contain a lot of visuals, so you're going to talk about it either with a live audience somewhere on site in a room, a fixed audience, or you're going to do it live through Insta Live, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and then basically it's very important that you record these sessions. Recording, because recording means you can add it to the website again, and it will be valuable for generations to come, for anyone in the world to see, rather than a fixed audience that was present, 50 people in that room during that day. So recording is so much more powerful to share later on. Finally then, based on those say 200 to 300 short video clips that you have taken through a months-long journey, key is of course to create a lot of unique, diverse content, very important highlights. So out of 200-300 clips you can easily build what I call a short film, like a short 15-20 minute film that will give like a nice overall movie or overall kind of film about the entire journey. So very easy to consume rather than reading 2000 word article in text. So beauty about the short films is that now you have quite a few forums like the Indian Mountaineering Foundation, the Himalayan Club, which organize annual film festivals, showcase these movies in like almost 100 cities across India. So this is another beautiful way to reach out to many people in a very visual way. I mean, nothing is better to communicate an experience than through a motion picture compared to text or even static photos. Okay, and then of course content storage. How are you gonna store all that content? You're gonna easily generate like 1.5 gigabytes of data, say 100 photos and 30 minutes of video every day. So managing this content both on the phone in the mountains will be one aspect. We'll come to that in the next chapter. But then once you come home, how do you store that content? So of course we're gonna store it on the cloud, only there it's safe. It's risky to keep it in a phone or on a hard disk or a USB drive, which might fail over time. Blogging, of course, all the text you do, all the stuff goes in WordPress, which is an online, you're gonna do it in some online hosting process, as we'll see in the next chapter. Videos can be dumped on YouTube. The beauty about YouTube is that there is no limit, except for some pretty sizable daily upload limit. There is no overall account size limited. In addition to that, excuse me. Photos can be stored on things like Google Drive or Google Photos, where of course you will have to pay for storage. I already have like some 200 GB there collected in the last 2 years, and that is only like really the shortlisted photos. So spreadsheets can be used to keep all your planning data, and then of course Google Maps are there, which contain all your maps basically. Voila, thank you for watching this first part of the 4 series webinar on Create, Share and Expire. See you guys tomorrow.